hold our governance accountable. We hold our leaders accountable, our managers accountable, and even ourselves accountable because we expect results. We expect good performance from them. So as soon as you hear good governance, what comes into mind is that how does the governance reflect in our performance and in results? I looked at what they call the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development definition of good governance, and it talks about the fact that the good governance is the respect for the rule of law, openness, transparency, and accountability to institutions, fairness, and equity in dealing with citizens. Of course, normally we're talking about good governance in supply chain procurement. What comes into mind is how do we follow the processes and procedures that have been laid out in our organization, ensuring that the procurement and supply chain processes are highly complied with. There are controls in place. There's transparency and openness. And as I said, in procurement and supply chain, the most important aspect that we all look at is the openness and transparency, how we are fair to the suppliers that we deal with, the organizations that we work with. So that is the definition from OECD. Another definition that I just also want us to look at is from the Ghana Challenge to Procurement and Supply, the UK. And I'm sure most of us on this call familiar with this organization, which is responsible for procurement supply chain globally. And they say good governance is defined as having the right structures, process, and people in place to meet organizations' aims and objectives while operating in a regulated environment. Now, we can talk about good governance when there are no structures. So it borders on structure, right structures. So as a quantity surveyor, as a procurement specialist, as a supply chain specialist, even in a different profession, what structures have you put in place? What processes have you put in place? And who are the people delivering these processes or structures in organization? And that will foster ensuring that there's a performance. And don't forget that I started by saying that good governance means performance and results. So in putting the structures in place, processes in place, and having the right people to execute the function professionally, it means that we're going to have a good results. We're going to achieve something substantial. We're going to add value. We're going to ensure that the organizations that we work for are very happy with us. Now, you mentioned the governance, which borders on controls and compliance. And I'm going to take you to three elements of governance. The first one is control and compliance. So in all organizations, what are the laws, what are the regulations governing our processes and systems? And I just don't want us to focus only on procurement supply chain, but in the entire organization, what are the processes and systems that are put in place? What are the laws and regulations and conventions? So you get into an organization that are where they do their thing. When you are in country, and I've seen people from Nigeria, from India, and other policies, other laws. So in Ghana, we have what we call the procurement systems that's amended. And I'm sure Nigeria, which all of you, South Africa, yeah, you just implement approved or passed the procurement and supply chain. How are we going to comply with? What are the processes that we put in place? How do we ensure that we are not in breach of all these laws and regulations? And in the organization, there are also policies, guidelines, and procedures and manuals. So you get into organization, and what you have to do is you study what the policies are saying, what the manuals are saying, and the processes are also saying. And so doing, it means that you are following and lay down structures and procedures, ensuring that whatever you're doing are compliant with the lay down process and procedures. And I have told many colleagues that wait till there's an issue, there's a breach. That's where you realize that there are a lot of laws and processes and regulations in the organization that
And it's clear.
It's better
Thank you.
now.
Please continue.
Okay. All right. So that is good. Thank you very much. So as I continue, I mentioned about the fact that there are also mandatory documentation that helps us to comply with certain standards and regulations and policies. And another aspect of good governance, I take it from digitization and innovation. And digitization and innovation, why is it good governance or it borders on good governance? We're saying that e-procurement is a strategic advantage. Why? Because when we're able to digitize the processes that we have in our organizations, especially when you're doing the keywords, when you're doing quantities, then when you're doing procurement, when you're doing processes, when you look at supply chain, and it's full automated, it gives visibility. And once it gives visibility, there's a high degree of compliance in what we do. When it gives visibility, there's an improved level of control in what we do. When there's a visibility of the spend, what it means is that we are adding value in whatever we do. So governance also borders on how innovative we are, how digitalized our processes are, and how we ensure that the the suppliers relationship are improved because we're taking away the manual processes from whatever we're doing. And as soon as the manual processes, the human interventions are taken away, what happens is that we are able to now control and comply with some standards that we do. In fact, the system that we're using currently, which is the electronic procurement. What happens is that we use the same system to do the due diligence. We use the same system for evaluation. We do the same system for spend analysis and visibility, and that helps us to comply with certain standard because all these KPIs have been preloaded into the system, and it helps us to comply with certain aspect. In fact, if we are registering or onboarding some suppliers or service providers, there are predefined criteria, there are predefined requirements that have been uploaded in the system. And not until these vendors or the service provider meet some of these requirements, they are not able to. I mean, they don't. We don't deal with them. So it is our duty to ensure that whilst we're looking at the compliance, we're looking at it from innovation point of view, from digitization point of view, and it becomes a strategic advantage for us. We're also looking at governance from human point of view, that we're looking at human capital. And the human capital, we're looking at the fact that in Graphics 2006 paper, where he looks at governance from human point of view, he came out with two critical issues that the human capital could be from a critical thinking point of view or from social capital point of view. And I would explain. Now, the analytical capital or the critical thinking point of view borders on the conceptualization of a problem. That in any processes that we superintend, in anything that we are doing in an organization, how do we conceptualize the problem? How do we see that this is a problem and how do you find solution to that problem? And that's what we call the analytical capital. Your ability to conceptualize, your ability to see that this has to be done, your ability to ensure that this control must be put in place. Your ability to ensure that this regulation must be followed. This has to be put in place. We have to establish some criteria and then also organize some information and for decision making. So that ability to conceptualize the decision making process and conceptualize the problem and then also be able to isolate those problems into components to be able to find solution to this problem is what we call analytical capital. And the graphics study on governance from the human capital point of view actually stipulated these four critical areas that we have to look at when you're talking about critical thinking. And then the second leg is what we call the social capital point of view, that what is the abilities and then personal traits. Now that personal trait now borders on how ethical are we, that as a human being, when we are superintending a process, when we are superintending an activity in an organization, and mind you, governance, borders on activities, it borders on processes, it borders on structures. When we are superintending on all these processes and systems, what is our personal trait? How ethical are we? What is our intuition? How confident are we to say that this process can stand the test of time? This process can meet some certification or some regulatory requirement and the like. What is our personal ability? So it vis-a-vis these two elements of human capital comes together to help us to ensure that the processes and procedures that we are superintending comply with some laid down processes and systems. And then more so on the social capital, talking about the flexibility, how flexible are our system, how adaptable our system to meet some requirement or regulatory activities. But in all these things, I look at what we call the pitfalls. And in our processes, either we are contracting, either we are sourcing, either we are soliciting. There are some issues that we have to look at, what I call it pitfalls, I call it issues. So within the procurement supply chain processes, there are three main processes that we go through. That's the pre-contracting stage, the contracting stage, and post-contracting stage. And within all these stages, there are pitfalls, there are issues, there are challenges that we'll look after. And this evening, I just want us to briefly go through these processes, the stages and how these pitfalls occur, so that we'll be able to discuss and have some kind of solution. So, for instance, one of the pitfalls that we picked out when we're doing the pre-contracting stage, and the pre-contracting stage is before an award of contract or before we issue the contract. So all activities that are done before we go into the contracting is what we call a pre-contract stage. And one of the things that we normally pick out is what we call artificial demand. Now, what is artificial demand? You go into the organization, and because there are probably no systems and everything is done manually, there's that kind of lack of proper planning. Okay, and when there's lack of proper planning, our demand becomes artificial because we are not able to gauge the proper demand, okay, from the time we need the items to the time that the items are delivered. Sometimes we have over planning, we have under planning, and an artificial planning. The artificial planning is where the items are not even needed, but we try and demand it. Though the activities are not needed, we try as much as possible to include it in our procurement plan or in our planning stage. When it happens, then what it means is that we go and buy these items. The organization may not be able to use it. But the idea is that to avoid this pitfall, there should be a collaboration between the user department, the stores department, and then the procurement department, the supply chain department. And when I say user department could be any of the technical people, and those people have to specifically specify the thing that they need and ensure that these items are these requirements are provided to the right people to vet it and comes to the procurement department, procurement supply chain department to be able to place the order to meet the requirement. And sometimes we also specify item to skip towards certain suppliers and the brand. And this one I've seen it all over and over and over as I go through the procurement and supply chain processes, because our colleagues, the engineers, especially the quantity surveyors who are there to specify, or architects who are there to specify some of the items, sometimes they are quick to say, okay, get this type of brand. They are quick to say that buy it from this supplier. Now, when that happens, it restricts competition. And when there's no competition, the research actually indicates that we are going to spend 30% more of whatever we buy. So whenever you are specifying things for us to buy for you, make sure that you have items that are generic so that you foster competition or you avoid brands. Because if you take, for instance, you're going to buy laptops. HP laptop is equally as good as Dell laptop, is equal as good as Lenovo, is equal as good as Samsung. So just specify, but without talking about the brand. Because if you talk about the brand, then it restricts competition. And if you have to go with one single supplier, you know the implication, the cost will be high. Sometimes you also have to make sure that we don't break bulk, because when you consolidate the orders, when you make sure that the demand is consolidated, it gives us more bargaining power, and ensure that we have a strong negotiation power, because we're going to give the suppliers a lot more orders, a lot more requirement. And for that matter, we can use that to ensure that we negotiate for favorable terms. So when I was in the ECOBAN, one of the banks, regional banks in Africa, I went into what you call global negotiation with about five major OMEs, Dell, HP, IBM, and stuff like that. And what we did was consolidate our orders from the group level, and I used that quantities to be able to negotiate and um, got a lot more discount for them. I did the same thing when I was also at the Standard Chartered Bank, Ghana. So breaking bulk, it does, I mean, it doesn't help, but we have to consolidate our orders. We have to also make sure that we are not focusing on single source and all the time that we are going to procure, because you have a favorite supplier, okay, that you deal with, or favorite brand that you deal with. You're always passing the brand to the procurement people, and it becomes a problem. We also have to avoid the big rigging and short deadlines. There's another thing that we also talk about: standardization. So standardization for me is good. We try to standardize some of our processes and systems, okay, but we shouldn't overly standardize, because if we're going to standardize on, let's say, vehicle such as Toyota, we can also have even vehicle Honda or any other equally important vehicle, that can perform. In this case, we are not putting all our eggs in one basket. In this case, we are not having single supplier or vendor relation strategy. We're having at least multi, so that when one supplier or a firm fails us, we're able to shift into another. So these are some of the things that pre-contract stage we can look at it, and then what do you call it, avoid. Another thing I want to mention is what you call vague item description. Sometimes you provide description or specification for the procurement people to procure, or the procurement function, a department to procure, and when the description is vague, it gives a lot of issues. In this case, we put the specification out there soliciting for um, quotation, and the suppliers come back to us and no, this is not correct. It means that we haven't done our homework, and it speaks a lot more volumes against the company. It means that we don't know what we're about. So the commendation is that let's try as much as possible to do a proper research, ask questions, use the tools available, and specify that items in the right quantity, in the right specification, and all the things that goes with it, so that when we go out there to solicit for quotations and tenders and pricing, it becomes a very easier for us to do. Now within the contracting, so we have awarded a contract. What then happened is that we have to now look at how these contracts are going to be delivered. And the keywords are people who bring what you call the quality assurance in delivering the contract. To be honest with you, the procurement supply chain people are not technical people. They just help in selection processes and due diligence to ensure that the contract has been signed. When the contract is signed, it is the duty of the user department, and in this case, the quantity surveyors within the organization who serve also as a project managers, to help us to manage this contract. And in managing this contract, we have to make sure that we do a rigorous inspection of whatever the companies or the contractors are delivering to us. sometimes you have to avoid what we call dubious certification. Now, the dubious certification is where the contractor certificate is not correct. It has not done the job that it's supposed to do. And the keywords that I've seen over the years will connive with the supplier, the contractor, to raise certificates that are dubious. And that is something that we have to be very, very careful about, because when the certificate is raised, the procurement department are not able to certify, because we are not technical people. So we have to make sure that the right thing done from the contractor point of view comes to the organization point of view, because we are all in this together. Ensure that the quality materials are used. Whatever you have specified in the BOQ, and we have to go according to that. And I've seen also a couple of contractors where they try to play around the specification, the quality of material. So, for instance, if you specify some tiles and some requirement, you know, the porcelain tiles, we have the Italian porcelain tile, we have other types of porcelain tile. So if you have specified and the specification is correct, you have to make sure that they comply with and supply what we have specified. You go to the site, though it's a porcelain tiles. You get in there, and whatever they've given to you is not whatever you have specified. So we have to make sure that we avoid wrong or low quality materials. And then delivery delays. When we delay the project, you agree with me that it adds about 20%, 30% to the cost of our project. And where is the delay coming from? Is it coming from the contractor side, or is it coming from the client side? If it's coming from the client side, then we have to make sure that we avoid that delays. If it's coming from the contractor side, what other punitive clauses have you put in the contract? What are the exit clauses that you have put in there? What are the things that if there's a delay, you'll be able to follow on it? And performance security, what is the value of performance security have you put in place to be able to follow on? So all these things are things that you have to look at. And the use of wrong Incoterms. Now, wrong Incoterms, people or a lot of professionals don't understand the Incoterms and the responsibility of a buyer and then a seller. All the Incoterms, I think the 21 Incoterms, have its own responsibilities and risk and issues. So if you take any one of them, you have to understand where the responsibility of a buyer ends and the responsibility of a seller ends, and what are the risks that each of them carries in the international trade. And then also advance payment. So sometimes we recommend for advance payment without actually looking at the security, because if you give a contractor advance payment without a security, you agree with me that the work will not be done because you've given them the manner. I'm not saying advance payment is wrong. You have to give advance payment, but it has to be secured by a bond or bank guarantee. And the last point is a post-qualification, also post-contract stage. When the contract has been executed, what happened? We have to make sure that we properly close it out to ensure that the material that they use is of high standards and other things. We haven't dealt with the governance. I will take some few minutes of your time to also look at the accountability aspect of it. And I just read a paper on the authored by Moblin and Zomifin 2017, which talks about accountability broadly denotes that the duty of an individual organization to answer in some way about how they have conducted themselves. So the governance is what you are supposed to do. Now, the accountability is how you're going to account that I'm supposed to put process and systems in place. I've done it. I'm accountable for it. Now, how have I conducted myself? Now, the Professor Douglas Bourton in his book, 2016, talks about the art of making a group or individual responsible for certain activities or outcomes. And that is how the accountability. Now, the accountability is also the process of holding an individual or an organization fully responsible for all aspects of the procurement supply chain processes over which they exert authority. So You're a professional person. You exert authority by taking some kind of decisions. Now, in taking those decisions, you are responsible. You are accountable to the people that put you there. You are accountable to the company that put you there. You are accountable to the manager that put you there. You're accountable to the person who entrusted a lot of that authority to you. That you are the head of the unit. You are quantity surveyor. You are accountable to the people that employed you, your employers, and you have to make sure that whilst you're accountable, you do right and back by looking at the governance aspect, the process and strategy that they put in place that for which you are responsible and ensure that you account for your stewardship. So the accountability encompasses seven things, and I just want to take a few minutes of your time to walk you through. Traceability. How can you trace the things that you are doing? The process and system that you have put in place, is it traceable? That tomorrow can they be able to tell you that you did A, B, C, and this is how I can show for it. This is the audit trail, because whatever you are doing, people are looking at you, and the people are watching you. Is your activity, your processes, your systems traceable to the thing that you are doing? Can you defend whatever you are doing, the process that you are superintending? Then can you defend it that today, if they ask you to defend your actions, and I always tell people that right now you can defend whatever you're doing, but give yourself 5 years, 10 years into that role. That 10 years from now, will you be able to defend the decision you have taken? Is the decision transparent? It is consistent with the rules and regulations that are available? Is it fair and equitable? Is it ethical? So this decision that you've taken, is it ethical or not? So all these things are things that you have to now look at it and ensure that these issues about transparency, these issues about accountability are the issues that you are responsible for it. Yeah, you are responsible for it. So the accountability borders on these seven things that we all must look at and ensure that we comply. It borders on ethics. And what is ethics? For me, the ethics represent how our how we regard our principles, how we honor our words, how we value each other, and ensuring that we don't abuse, we don't exploit, we have right human behavior, we avoid corruption, we avoid bribery, we avoid fraud, and then modern slavery as well. And these are the things that we have to do. But Challenge of procurement and supply actually define ethics and said ethics can be related to a wide range of issues from supply business, procedures and processes to corruption, common areas such as fair trade, ethical trading, ethical sourcing, social accountability, social auditing, CSR, code of conduct, and reputation. So broadly, this is how ethics is defined, and it's part of our accountability. How ethical are we? Can we uh, sit down, or can a colleague just point out and say, oh, as for this person is very ethical in whatever they do? Because the QAs are also people who sometimes do a lot more with the suppliers. And then they do a lot more with the suppliers because they have to now look at the quantity that's supposed to be used. They look at the items that's supposed to be used. And if they are not ethical, they can connive with the contractors to be able to defraud the company. The last issue that I just want us to look at is another accountability that we call the code of conduct. Now, this code of conduct, and I'm happy to share that this is some, we call it Nalin 7 Principles of Public Life. So back in 70s in the United Kingdom, there was an issue about the public service. And the public service was deteriorating, and I'm sure it's the same as what is happening in Africa and probably part of the world, where the public service is deteriorating because people don't have integrity. People come to office to amass wealth. People come to office and they think about themselves. There are no service quality and stuff like that. So they put a committee together, which was chaired by the Lord No. Now, and the committee came up with 7 principles, and these principles are principles that governs every public servant. And in this case, every servant who wants to be professional. And the first one is accountability, which I've talked about it. The second one is what we call selflessness. How selfless are we that we can now say, oh, I'm here to work and ensure that the company survive and it's a company that's well. The how in what integrity do you have that today, if you are not there, people can attest to the fact that you exhibit your role uh ethically in this way. How objective are you ensuring that you deal with all the contractors and suppliers and everybody equally? That as a practitioner, as a professional, you are very objective, you are very fair and firm with the contractors that you deal with the suppliers that you deal with, the company that you work, even with your colleagues. How objective are you? And also leadership, that the leadership is everything. That when you are pretending any function, any any activity, any structure, how are you bringing that leadership skill in there to ensure that the company gets value for money, and there is always what do you call it, value that accrue to the company that has put you there. Honesty, how honest are you, and openness as well. So these 7 principles of a public life is what I recommend for everybody on this call this evening. Then you ask yourself, which of them that do you practice? Which of them do you see yourself? Then as a professional, I'm very accountable because I know that people have put me there. They trust that I do the right thing. I'm selfless because I'm not thinking about what I'm getting out of the processes that I'm pretending, but I am selfless because I have to serve my people. I have to serve the organization that employed me, and unfortunately, even the organization that we're working with, we are using the organization resources for our advantage. We are using the organization resources to further our companies, to further our schools, to further our education. So the time that the company has located to us that the company is paying for, and I'm an employer. The company is paying for your time, 5 to 8, and within the 5 to 8, you spend, let's say, less than 4 hours for the company, and use the rest of the hours to do your own thing, to study or to do a second job or something. Selfless. What integrity do you have? So all these things are things that you have to now begin to think about it. And I'm going to leave this slide with you that as a servant, okay, in an organization, as a public servant, or as an employee, how are you living these principles and values in ensuring that you now support organization to grow an organization to become better? So on this note,